We will go ahead and begin. So I'm Liz Matthews here at CNCS headquarters in Washington, D.C. I'm the AmeriCorps Vista Alumni Outreach and Support Specialist, and I'm joined by our friends at Campaign Consultation, Robin Stegman and Suzanne Knizner, who are behind the scenes and helping us to run everything smoothly. So today's topic, building relationships through community partnerships, really is a very relevant topic to almost every VISTA member that's serving. Relationships are at the heart of what VISTAs do, and knowing how to build successful relationships will really benefit you throughout your career. Let's take a look at today's agenda and what we're going to cover. So today we're going to look at what is the definition of a community partnership. Why is it a worthwhile approach to solving community issues? How do you go about finding partners and establishing those relationships? How do you know when they're successful? How do you know when they need help? So we're going to hear from some expert presenters to cover all of this material and more. And then we're very excited because we have two current AmeriCorps Vista members who are going to be our guest speakers, Catherine Cochin, who's serving in Florida, and Rachel Lyman, who is in Texas. So we look forward to hearing from them in a little bit. And at the end, we will be able to answer all the questions that you might have either through the phone or in the Q&A box underneath the chat. So now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. We have Lois Morgan and Mike Beebe. Lois is an instructional designer at Bank Street College of Education, which is part of the team that designs and develops the training and learning opportunities for AmeriCorps Vista members, leaders, and supervisors. She has worked on revamping the pre-service orientation, the PSO curriculum, and has developed webinars for Vistas on a variety of relevant topics. She's also designed and developed other online learning tools which are located on the Vista campus. And we have Mike. You may recognize Mike Beebe as he is a facilitator at many of our PSO trainings. Mike started Leadership for Change training and consulting services in 2004. And since then, he has worked with thousands of individuals and groups to help develop their leadership skills. And he has found building strategic partnerships critical to the success of programs. Mike has also supervised many VISTA members throughout his career. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Lois.
Thank you, Liz. So let's get started here. What is it that you'll come away with after participating in this webinar? There are four main things that you will be better at doing. Firstly, you'll realize the enormous value of developing partnerships with other community groups to further both your own goals, your organization's goals, and those of the community at large. Secondly, you'll see that there are many options and places in the community where you can find the right partner or partners for your mission. Thirdly, you'll begin to focus on which specific organizations, be they government agencies or businesses or civic groups, that you might successfully collaborate with. And lastly, you'll be able to recognize the most important success factors for developing partnerships and avoid common mistakes. Well, we're now going to spend about 10 minutes working through a case study. It's about a hypothetical place called the Gaston community, where each of you, will be serving as an AmeriCorps Vista at the Gaston YMCA. We'd like everyone to participate. It's an opportunity to begin thinking concretely about the relationships and building the relationships in your community to form partnerships. The Gaston YMCA is a leader in youth development in the community, has been for over 30 years, and it provides tutoring and mentoring services and also recreational opportunities for youth in the neighborhood. Your VAD has tasked you with increasing academic services for youth like tutoring and mentoring, coaching, and also incorporating a teen hangout that will stay open late to provide recreational opportunities for the young people in the neighborhood, to keep them off the streets and keep them engaged in constructive activities. Your challenge is that you really need to find a new space, and probably sooner rather than later. You need to expand your services, which this VAD is leading you towards, and you need to accommodate the increased services and find a new space. You're really breaking out of where you have right now. Here's some more background information to consider before we get into some of the questions. In the Gaston community, gentrification has been taking place. Wealthier residents are beginning to move into this low-income neighborhood, and there have been increasing tensions and dislocation in the community. The youth are academically underachieving, and there is increased delinquency around. Some other of the nonprofits or institutions in the community are also affected by these conditions. For example, the Gaston Neighborhood Association, the local Presbyterian Church, the Parks and Recreation Department, and the local high school. So let's now consider a few questions. Given this scenario where you are serving as a VISTA, if you were to seek to partner with any of these, what common interests or values might you share? And if you could right now write in some of your answers in the chat, we can see what you're all thinking. Youth engagement, excellent. Keeping kids safe, absolutely. Neighborhood safety, that's a good point. Education, definitely focus on education for everyone and for all. Community development, yes. Health and wellness, excellent. Getting kids active, absolutely, in constructive ways. Again, this is similar, providing positive opportunities for youth. These are all excellent, excellent values that you share with many of these organizations. I'm seeing a lot of these similar ideas from many of you. Again, another one, having an open spiritual space, as YMCA's traditional values are based in Christian values. That is true as well. College and trade prep, absolutely. Excellent. We will now turn to another question. Next question, next slide, yep. In order to really clarify your view, how can you find out, in fact, what interests and values your organizations share? Rather than speculating, how can you actually find this out? Again, write some answers in the chat. Mission statements, absolutely. Ask, yeah, it's a very simple and powerful word, ask. Focus groups is another good suggestion here. Past activities of the organization, absolutely, building on past activities. The almighty Google search, yes, that is an excellent idea. Online research first, then call. Yes, that's very valuable to do that. Co-host an event. These are great ideas, everyone. This is absolutely terrific. I'll give you just a couple more seconds, and then we're going to move on. Needs assessments. Schedule a meeting. These are great. Community mapping, absolutely. That's a very, very important tool for building partnerships. Okay, just to summarize this very, very mini case study, the purpose is really to get you to begin the thinking process, very concretely and ask the kinds of questions that you need to ask before starting the journey of developing meaningful partnerships. But let's go back now and define our terms. What exactly do we mean by a community partnership? I'm now going to turn this over to Mike Beebe, who's going to talk with you and lead you through the rest of the webinar. Mike?
Thank you, Lois. Wonderful comment so far. So yeah, we're going to explore what is a community partnership. So great to be on the call with you all. See some familiar faces see some familiar names in the chat box from Vista PSOs. So when we talk about a community partnership, you'll see a definition on the slide in front of you. Simply put, it's a partnership, it's a collaborative relationship between two or more organizations, institutions, businesses to meet shared goals. Included in that partnership are agreements about how they're going to divide up the work involved to meet the goals. Sometimes it's nonverbal, sometimes it's verbal agreements, and sometimes it's in writing. As you think about the different kinds of partnerships, to just get us thinking about the various ways this plays out in our community, look to the next slide, kinds of partnerships. So the first kind is between and among community-based organizations. I'm going to share some examples from my community, which is Seattle, Washington. An example of a partnership between and among community-based organizations in my community, for example, is the Seattle Food Committee. We have 27 food banks in Seattle that formed a coalition to be more effective in their efforts to fight hunger. They work with food distributors and other service providers to coordinate and maximize the efficiency of Seattle's emergency food system. They also want to make sure there's healthy, organic produce available at all the local food banks. Second type of partnership is cross-sector. And when I say cross-sector in this moment, means across different arenas. So it could mean nonprofit with a for-profit business or nonprofit with a public government agency. Another example from Seattle would be the Green Seattle Partnership. In 2005, a local nonprofit called EarthCore began working with the City of Seattle Department of Parks and Recreation to accomplish their goal to restore 2,500 acres of urban forest by 2025. So again, a nonprofit partnering with the City of Seattle to achieve a common goal of restoring urban forests. Public-private partnership is another term you'll often hear. Certainly that last example could also be called a public-private partnership, but it's often used to mean a public agency partnering with a for-profit business. A high-profile partnership in Seattle has happened between the Seattle Housing Authority and Vulcan Incorporated. Some of you may be familiar with Vulcan because that's a real estate firm founded by former Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen. Seattle Housing Authority and Vulcan are partnering to redevelop Yesler Terrace low-income housing, which is a public housing project in the heart of Seattle, into a mixed-income housing development. The way this partnership's going to work is Vulcan's going to buy portions of Yesler Terrace's 30 acres of land to finance public housing. Those are three different kinds of partnerships and three terms that you'll often heard when we speak of partnerships. And then, of course, there are many degrees of collaboration, as you'll see. Next slide, please. There are many degrees of collaboration. Sometimes it's highly informal. I was a part of, for many years, the King County Youth Workers Coalition, where it was a group of youth development professionals who met quarterly for networking and sharing information about area youth programs and to also identify gaps in services in the community. We didn't have a board of directors. We didn't have our own organization. We didn't have bylaws. We simply got together on a quarterly basis to share information. On the other end of the continuum is a highly formalized collaboration where there may be a board of directors. There may be bylaws. An example of this is Win-Win Network in the state of Washington, which is a coalition of organizations across Washington state committed to increasing civic engagement in underrepresented communities. Win-Win Network has its own 501c3 status and its own organization. It has bylaws, it has a board of directors, it has staff. Its whole mission and vision revolves around making sure that the over 50 organizations in its membership are working effectively together to meet their goal of increasing civic engagement throughout the state of Washington. There are also many words for collaborative relationships: coalition, collaboration, cooperation, strategic alliance, partnership, merger, to name a few. You'll want to clarify, of course, what people mean when they use these words, because I have seen them used differently in different contexts. I want to talk briefly about some elements of building a partnership. So using some of the past examples here. One is the degree to which you have shared objectives. Win-Win Network and Seattle Food Committee have some very clear shared objectives. Win-Win Network to increase civic engagement. Seattle Food Committee to make sure they're addressing hunger effectively in the city of Seattle. So sometimes it's rather obvious, and other times there are some shared objectives that could include a for-profit business, for example, that some of the leadership really cares about that issue in the community. So for example, if Starbucks headquarters here partnered with the Seattle Food Committee to make sure we are addressing hunger needs in the community. Another element of partnerships look at is the amount of shared decision making. With any partnership, we at least should be clear on how much of the decision making we're going to share. Again, I shared a couple examples of a couple of partnerships where they're sharing on a pretty high level. They meet regularly to discuss their decisions and make them collaboratively. Sometimes it's infrequent and they're just the bigger decisions that they get together on. And then to what extent are there mutual investment of resources, and also what resources are partners investing? Often we're talking about time and money here, and so being clear about who's investing what time and what amount of dollars to the partnership. And certainly there should be clarity about level and frequency of communication. Are we going to meet once a month? Are we going to meet once a quarter? Are we going to have monthly phone calls? Being clear about how that communication is going to happen. And then sharing of activity tasks. A good partnership is going to also have some clear roles laid out about how we're going to share the tasks involved. And also reporting techniques and frequency. So we'll want to be clear about how often we're going to report to each of the partners. So big question is, why develop community partnerships? What's the value? Well, when I see this question, it might seem rather obvious. I want to get more done to improve my community. Or in the AmeriCorps Vista setting, we want to end poverty, right? So partnerships, the idea is we're going to be more effective in our ability to do that when we come together to do it rather than working on our own. In what way specifically could partnerships be valuable? So what I'd like to do is, this is where I'm going to turn to you all, and I'd like you to get specific and say a bit, yeah, how do you see partnerships being of value? Please reply in your chat box on the screen, and I'll read off a few, as Lois did before, as they're entered. And I'm already seeing many answers. Pooled resources, funding, sharing ideas, services won't be doubled, less money for more distribution, continuum of care, cutting out duplicated services, not reinventing the wheel. Seeing some themes emerge here. Two heads are better than one, and keep increasing your role in the community. Efficiency. Funders like seeing collaboration. Yes, money can, people are giving us money, want to see it. My organization is Boys and Girls Club, and we need to collaborate with schools to track our members' academic progress. So it can help us figure out how are we doing with those outcomes. Expanding outreach capacity. Sustainability, increased efficiency or efficacy. Greater influence and community awareness. I have volunteers, they need volunteers. Services expansion. Reach more individuals in the community. So again, I'm seeing this theme of greater impact clearly, greater impact. So I'm going to read one more publicity. Okay, we could publicize the great efforts of a community. So you'll see on this slide many of the answers you've already put in. More clients served. I'm going to keep going back to some examples just for consistency here. Seattle Food Committee meets. They want to make sure anybody who's anyone who is hungry in Seattle can benefit from their local food bank. So one way they're able to make sure that happens is through the collaborative partnership with the Seattle Food Committee. Decrease in competition for limited resources. So as some of you commented, funders are asking organizations to apply together for funding so they can be more efficient in using that money to meet community needs. And then in so doing, you don't have two organizations having to, quote unquote, recreate the wheel. Also, partnerships are a great way to be more accountable to the community. Can you go back a slide still, please? Thank you. are a great way to be more accountable to the community being served. For example, my former employer, Solid Ground, which is an anti-poverty organization, formed an advisory board made up of low-income people in the community to make sure we were providing the services that were needed for the community. Okay, so let's talk about who in our community we can partner with. What are the array of possibilities? So next slide, thank you. And next slide. So we're providing this visual of a community wheel here to spark your creative thinking in terms of what are the types of partners we can partner with. Are there perhaps some categories of partnerships that we hadn't considered? One of the early jobs in my career was working with young homeless folks, and they often had the experience of being harassed by the local police officers. So it didn't really occur to me that perhaps the police could be a real partner in supporting homeless youth because of the experiences I was hearing from the homeless youth that I worked with. So it was a novel idea when local organization Peace for the Streets by Kids from the Streets, a organization run by and for local homeless youth, decided to invite local police officers to a program called Donut Dialogues, and using that old cliche that police officers like their donuts to attract them to community meetings. And they partnered to have a series of community meetings about how to improve relations between homeless young people and the police. And some amazing results happened. There were a number of community police officers that became key people that homeless young people would go to when they needed to find resources like housing, like food, like a safe place to be. So looking at this wheel, think about like who is it that perhaps I haven't thought about partnering with that could make a really powerful partner. You see everything from legislators on the wheel, senior citizens, families, youth, cultural groups, recreational programs. So use this as just a way to spark some of your creative thinking. I'm pleased now to hear a real live example from Catherine about a successful partnership story. So I'd like to hand it off to you, Catherine, now.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. As you said, my name is Catherine Cochin, and I am a current VISTA serving for Heart of Florida United Way's program Together for Tomorrow. And I just recently enrolled for another year as a VISTA leader for the same program. This past year, I've been serving in a school in Seminole County, Florida called Pinecrest Elementary. The goal of the program is to improve attendance behavior, classroom performance, and college access in Title I schools in Central Florida. And how we do that is by recruiting volunteers to mentor and tutor the kids in the Title I schools. How I have been able to reach this goal is by forming partners within our local community. My two biggest partners are Seminole State College, and my biggest business partner is Our Hope for Children. I was able to form my partner with Seminole State College was networking with the other VISTAs at the time. Our VISTA leader went and gave a recruiting speech at Seminole State, just a broad recruiting speech, and through that was just trying to generate interest in service learning classes for the college to benefit both the college students and the elementary students or middle school students within the community. Through this, we generated a lot of buzz, and I was put in contact with a psychology professor and was able to form a service learning class at Seminole State. And we have also networked out into other professors, and I'm currently recruiting from over 5 professors at the college. And over the past year, Pinecrest Elementary alone has received over 150 volunteers. So this has been a great, great partner for both the college students and for Seminole County. My next partner, Our Hope for Children, I found by networking out through the teachers at Pinecrest Elementary. I found that the teachers were one of my biggest allies. They'd been in the community for a while, they knew what the school needed, and they knew people in the community that were willing to help. So by going out and helping the teachers and talking with them, figuring out what they need, that sort of thing. So through this, I was put in contact with a lady at one of our teachers' churches, and she wanted to find a way to give back to the local community. And she developed her own 501c3 called Our Hope for Children. I don't know if you guys are familiar with 501c3s and how to create them, but it's been a really long process, and we're just now starting to see the fruits of the labor, and they're starting to donate for needs for our kids, such as shoes, backpacks, clothes, food, that sort of thing. So that's also been a great relationship, and hopefully it will continue to grow. So again, just reiterating a little bit about my process. The biggest thing that I found that helped me was integrating myself into the school, into my program. Really getting to know my own program's mission statement, so Together for Tomorrow and United Ways, and then getting to know our school's needs and our school's culture. When I first got to Pinecrest, it was hard to integrate myself. So by going and helping out myself, I was able to build trust with the teachers, with the faculty and staff, and I also found that it was the best way to find partners. So yeah, that's how I was able to build partners within my community, and thank you so much for all listening.
Thank you, Catherine. Great example of effective partnership building. So who might be a good fit? Just to reiterate, and I'm going to pull from Catherine's example, that a person, a group, organization's mission, vision is similar to yours is a natural place to start. The fact that she was able to partner with Seminole State College makes a lot of sense. There's a win-win relationship there in terms of what they're trying to achieve. Students that are learning about how to work with people more effectively in psychology classes, engaging them as tutors is a great way for them to learn more about their future profession, as well as meeting that need of tutoring students at Pinecrest Elementary. So again, starting with the alignment of mission and vision is going to really ground you well in a partnership. There's many other factors, of course. Resources often drive a partnership request. Sometimes we don't have enough money, and so we're looking for partners who can bring financial resources to the table. In this case, Catherine had a great example of just really needing volunteers to tutor at the school, and so looking for places like a local university, local college to provide those volunteers. Also, nice example of some expertise. Students were learning how to be mentors and teachers, and probably some of them, if they're in psychology class, going to be therapists. So learning about working with people, and so there's actually an area of expertise also in the professors that help build that partnership. So that's a starting point for who might be a good fit. Now let's talk about how to identify potential partners. Actually, what we say is slow down and start with understanding your own organization, making sure it's clear what your goals are, what resources you have to offer in a partnership. Maybe you do bring financial resources, you bring personnel, or you bring some specific expertise to a partnership. Thinking also about what is the culture of your organization. What kind of infrastructure does your organization have? Again, I want to end with this question, like, yeah, what do I have, or what does my organization have to offer in a partnership? Because effective partnerships, there's going to be a win-win in it so that both parties are going to get something out of that partnership. So start with knowing your own organization, and then get to know the community's needs. What does the community want? Who is achieving amazing things in the community? What kind of strengths are in the community? So this do some asset mapping recommendation on this slide is largely about identifying strengths in your community. There is a formal process for asset mapping. We recently presented a webinar on mapping community assets, and it's available for viewing on demand on the Vista campus. Highly recommend you go back and take a look at that as you enter into your partnership building. I just happened to notice someone commented surveys can be very helpful with getting to know needs and assets. So absolutely great recommendation. So continuing on, how to identify with potential partners. Well, this next slide might seem pretty simple, but it's so important. Visit and talk with people in the community who are affected in some way by your focus issue. What this brings back for me is what we stress so much in the Vista pre-service orientation was that, have your minute message ready or your elevator speech, basically that quick message about what you do in the community. A strong networker is always going to be looking for opportunities to identify shared goals and interests, and always looking for ways in which they can find win-win partnerships. And what I'd encourage you to do is not think about it as just during your work hour time. That sometimes the best partnerships come out of being at some kind of social event and just sharing the great work you're doing. You never know when you might stumble upon someone or some organization, some connection that will help you further your organization's goals. So starts with talking with people. So building the relationships, 5 critical steps, some of which we referred to. But again, determine if your organization's ready to partner. Like, do you have clear vision goals? If you're not clear about what you want, it's hard to partner. Assess the needs and motivations of potential partners. Again, that's making sure you're aligned. Like, is there, are you working towards some shared goals together? And then align those interests, mission, and goals. Once they're aligned, of course, you have to plan out the work. What's that relationship going to look like? What are the roles, tasks, and responsibilities of the partners in the partnership, whether it be 2 partners or 3 or 4? In Seattle Food Committee's case, it's 27 food banks. And then once a partnership is initiated, you also have to manage the relationship. Next slide, please. And you see big, bold quote here. Successful partnerships manage the relationship, not just the deal. Communication is so critical in the work that we do, and especially in forming partnerships across organizations and institutions. That challenge when they're not even working in the same space, we need to have clear systems for communication, and we also need to have open, direct, and thoughtful communication. We're going to have issues and challenges, so we need to be ready to communicate and negotiate around different points of view and negotiate different terms. So with that, I'm going to have us, I'm glad to have another example of a strong partnership and another type of partnership. Pleased to introduce you to Rachel now, another AmeriCorps Vista member. So Rachel, would you please take over?
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Myman. I work at Big Austin, or Business Investment Growth. We're a small nonprofit in Austin, Texas. I saw a few other Austinites in the chat, so hey, guys. So we currently have 11 staff members, including 2 AmeriCorps Vista members. We're a small business development resource, so we provide 3 main services to small business, and that's business training and workshops, one-on-one counseling, and microloans. And I serve as the business development coordinator. So what it says on the slide is essentially my role. Sometimes I write grants and expand programs, but like any other nonprofit, we all wear a lot of hats. So on any given day, I can also be a web developer, an event planner, or a marketing person. So there's a lot going on here. So Big Austin was a participant in eBay's Small Business Challenge that they did in the city of Austin. And this was a contest basically for nonprofits to enter, and the winners would receive consulting and technological services from a team of eBay employees. So someone from eBay came in and told us about the opportunity and showed us a little video, told us how to apply, etc. And after they left, no one was really sure what to do. It was a really quick turnaround time from when they came and when the application was due. I want to say maybe a week. So I decided, okay, I have to be proactive about this. I had absolutely no idea what the chances of winning were, and I was still pretty new to the organization at that point. So basically, I just went for it. And I think it's really important to take initiative like that, especially as a Vista. In a small organization like the one I'm in, there really is room to grow, but to do that, you have to take on responsibility. And so for me at this point, it came in the form of taking the lead on a really uncertain opportunity. So the question on the application was simple: what technological challenges does your nonprofit organization face? And I answered it, and long story short, we were one of the 6 nonprofits that won the contest. Next slide, please. So for the past few months, we've been having weekly meetings with our eBay team. It's been going really well. We have 6 team members, and we have about 2 months left of the assigned partnership duration. So there are a list of things that we wanted to tackle with them, big picture things: updating our website, building a database, building a new website actually, and updating our database. But those are more long-term projects that we can start with them and then work on after they leave us. What we have accomplished so far are setting up a Moodle site for a training program, which is huge, since previously it was just the course description on the website, and that was it. We have about 50 classes that we offer quarterly, so the Moodle platform is a good way to give the instructor a chance to upload content and have the participants discuss things in an online forum. It just gives us a lot more opportunity that we never had before, so it's really great. They also helped us with the donation platform for one of our campaigns that we're rolling out early next year. We had a website for it, and then one of our team members helped me put a PayPal donate button on the website and then connect it to our bank account so that when money does come in through the site, it'll go into the right accounts. One last thing I'll say about our achievements is that there was a time when they just completely saved our lives. We were getting ready to have an event on October 10th, and one day in early October, totally out of the blue, our entire homepage of our website just crashed. Our registration page was gone where people were supposed to buy their tickets. Everything was just totally gone. So the next day our eBay team came in, and I don't know what they did, but they recovered everything. So it was a really chaotic 18-hour period that thankfully wound up being solved by our partnership with this group of people. So it was great, but it was crazy. So as far as what eBay has gotten out of the partnership, I think that they really enjoy the fresh perspective they get from working with us. So working in corporate and having a corporate mindset is totally different from working in a nonprofit. You know, corporations need to be about efficiency all the time or they're losing money. Nonprofits often have a more holistic approach, and they don't always see things in that light that corporations do. So I think they've been learning a lot from us. And it's totally mutual too. So, you know, I've been working in nonprofits since I graduated college, so hearing advice and input that's coming from people in the corporate world has been really eye-opening for me too, and I think for everyone in our organization. Sorry. So one sort of evolution in the partnership came from just a simple adjustment in our meeting location. The team used to come to our offices, but for the past month and a half or so, we've been going there to the eBay campus. I think it started making the meetings more efficient and focused. Here, I think it's easy to get distracted by day-to-day tasks since we're in our day-to-day environment, but when we go there, it's for a specific purpose, and I think that that's helped a lot. So maybe that's one thing to think about when you're creating your own partnerships, is to have a designated meeting spot when you have meetings with your two groups. So the team members themselves, they're a really great group of people. I'd say we get along pretty well. It's really hard to establish that when you walk into a partnership with strangers, but really just taking the time to get to learn about them as people in a respectful way, of course, it makes it much easier to get along professionally. So in our case, eBay and Big Austin both have pretty relaxed company cultures. So with this group, we were able to establish a friendliness from the outset, which really enabled the relationship to grow in a natural way. So we'll start chatting about what kind of music we like or what we're doing that weekend before the actual meetings start. So it's just all about developing rapport that, you know, makes things progress further. As far as the future of this partnership beyond the Small Business Challenge, I think some of this relationship will definitely continue on. So we have some upcoming programs that focus specifically on women entrepreneurs. And one of our team members asked me if I would give a presentation to those about those two programs to EWIT, which stands for eBay Women in Technology. So this is a volunteer-led group for eBay women employees, and they focus on philanthropy and career development. So actually, through this partnership, EWIT has adopted our programs and will be helping us a lot in the future. So that's something incredible and long-lasting that's come out of this. They've also introduced us to a lot of grant opportunities through their eBay Foundation, so that's been pretty helpful as well. And eBay also has a lot of platforms for nonprofits. Like, you can register for eBay GivingWorks, which when people buy stuff on eBay, some of the proceeds from their purchase, or maybe they could donate a little bit extra for that purchase, will go to your organization. So it's just another extra little way to get funding that they've introduced us to. So the partnership has definitely been interesting so far. I'm very excited to see where it takes our organization in the future. And now I'll turn it back over to Mike. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. Great story of a successful partnership between a well-known for-profit business and and a local nonprofit. It's always good to hear those stories. And great to illustrate these points that I'm about to get into, key success factors. So this is what's been found in terms of successful partnerships. One, we keep reiterating this, but shared purpose and outcomes, cleared about that shared purpose and outcomes is so critical. Big Austin was looking for new ways to improve their technology. eBay and PayPal have technology skills to offer. And also, you didn't say this explicitly, Rachel, but I imagine they did have in mind they'll expand their customer base by engaging in this partnership. They probably also want to help you achieve the goals of your organization, but it probably makes good business sense for them as well. In Catherine's partnership, a natural partnership took place between Seminole State College faculty, students, and Pinecrest Elementary to provide tutoring. College students get real-life experience applying what they're learning in college, while Pinecrest Elementary students are getting their tutoring needs met. Again, shared purpose outcomes. Clear process and structure. I liked hearing Rachel's example of Big Austin and eBay, and the one advantage they had going into it is the Small Business Challenge had laid out the specifics of when that partnership would start and stop. She also made some comments about the meeting structure. I think I heard they met weekly. So as we hear, it takes time to form good partnerships. And then at some point they decided meeting on the eBay campus was going to be more effective than meeting at Big Austin. So having a clear process and structure, and I would also say being willing to adapt when you notice things will lead to greater effectiveness. Positive climate, communication, and relationship. We heard in both AmeriCorps Vista stories, both Catherine and Rachel's examples, that part of the successful collaboration was ongoing communication with each other. Catherine talked about just being in the classroom and forming relationships with the teachers was a critical part of building that trust to building the tutoring program. Rachel talked about just the similar company cultures and having a relaxed relationship with each other and talking about more than just the business at hand helped build that relationship. Also, of course, resources and support. We just heard an example where eBay had both time and money to offer, which really helped. But a key success factor is going to be having both those present somehow, and so sometimes that will play out in the hand of the first example, lots of good volunteer help to help make it happen, and then also we heard the example of a separate nonprofit being formed to meet some additional needs of students. Let's look at some common stumbling blocks. Those are some success factors. Let's look at some ways that partnerships fail. Learn from our mistakes. Well, in partnering to chase the dollar, we've made reference to this earlier in the webinar. Funders are asking organizations more and more to apply together for funding to encourage collaboration. Sometimes in those cases, organizations, in an effort to meet a deadline, agree to partner without stopping to think about the success factors we just discussed. Without stopping to think, oh, do we actually have the same goals? So we get into partnership and realize the goals are different. Sometimes organizations enter partnerships without realizing that it takes additional money and time to pull them off. The weekly meetings that was referred to, that takes both time and money for a partnership. So without thinking out how they're going to take that time, sometimes the partnerships can fail because of just not being able to step up to that challenge. I think culture clashes. We heard about a few cases here. A couple stories we heard. There were some nice, sort of light culture that led to a stronger partnership. Well, sometimes we'll see very different cultures clash, like corporate culture versus nonprofit culture. It sounded like in Rachel's example, we were hearing they were enjoying learning and gaining from each other's strengths. Well, sometimes that corporate culture and nonprofit culture can be too hard to bridge. And so it should be, something to think about. The other type of culture clashes I see often in my community, and I imagine you would see in yours, are around dominant culture and non-dominant culture. I'm going to use one example that I recently heard about. We have an organization in Southeast Seattle where I live called the Vietnamese Friendship Association that does work with Vietnamese immigrants and refugees, help them integrate into the U.S. And they often get asked to partner, quote unquote, by larger organizations that have been mandated to collect information, collect input and feedback from the Vietnamese community. without coming to the table with money for their time. They're a small organization. They have about 10 staff, and often these mainstream organizations, often led by white middle-class folks, are coming to them for information or resources without offering much benefit to that smaller organization and that specific culture. And so that's something we need to think about. Again, going back to that win-win relationship, making sure the relationship's not exploitative. We want to make sure it's mutually beneficial. So in conclusion, I want to just stress a few factors that make or break relationships. Again, you're going to hear me repeat a few things, but I think worth repeating. Ideology. So how do different values and beliefs impact partnership building? To be thinking about that question. Let's go back to that initial example in the Gaston community, the YMCA running into that challenge around space. Well, one idea that might have come from that is housing the YMCA in the local church. In fact, someone did write it in their comments. And that does happen often, but we do have to think about what are the potential pitfalls of that. Well, again, in my community, we have a fairly large Muslim community, and we want young Muslim people to be able to access after-school programming. They may not be comfortable going into the local Christian church. They may also be okay with it if we're very clear that it's not a space that there's going to be religious proselytizing. So some things to think about in ideology. One example where that could come into conflict. Leadership. How does leadership or lack thereof affect partnership building? So one thing we probably all see happen, we know that there's charismatic leaders in the community that may have a long history of doing effective work. Those are very attractive organizations to partner with when they have those leaders, those executive directors that have this long-standing respect in the community. On the flip side, we probably all know some leaders that may not have the greatest reputation, and so we might want to be thoughtful about, do we want to partner with that organization or that person? That's a little bit about the people. Let's talk a little bit about once you're in a partnership, you also need people who can get things done, and so they can think through these factors that we're talking about now. They can think through what their roles are going to be in that partnership. So having strong leaders in that respect too. Power. The question I'd ask here is, how does power and privilege or lack thereof affect partnership building? So I used the example of the Vietnamese Friendship Association, which would be a good example in this case. Here is a community that has faced discrimination and oppression in our city and also in our country. And so when they're approached by mainstream organizations that are coming to them with good intentions, but without some mutually beneficial goals in mind, they're a little more reluctant to partner with them. So thinking out power, also thinking back to that original scenario, I want to talk about youth-adult relationships in this case and how trust plays out among youth and adults in our communities. So for example, we often apply for funds for youth programs without involving youth in the actual writing of the grant or even getting their input on what youth actually are needing. Do they want a teen hangout space, or do they want academic tutoring? Probably they would love a combination of the two. And so we need to be able to hear that feedback from young people in that case. History and relationships. How can the group's history and relationships in the community affect partnership building? Well, we know this has great influence. I referred to dynamic, charismatic leaders. Well, using that YMCA example, YMCA has a long history in many communities across the U.S. as providing positive youth programming. That reputation can go a long way for an organization forming partnerships. In fact, in Seattle, the Y has a very involved partnership with Seattle School District to provide after-school enrichment activities in our public schools. And a lot of that initial partnership was formed and was trusted because of their long, strong history of doing youth programming in the community. I've been a part of some other youth organizations that were newer, and it was hard to partner simply because we didn't have the history in the community. So we need to find ways to leverage other organizations that have that strong history to get into Seattle schools and partner with them. Competition and resources is definitely another factor that makes or breaks. How can the perception of abundance or scarcity affect the partnership building? We can point to many examples during this recession of both failure and success when it comes to collaboration in a climate where there's not as much financial resources. I have witnessed a number of organizations merge and weather this recession well because they're able to merge around similar goals and actually provide more effective services despite having less financial resources. And then we've also seen a number of organizations close down their doors because they didn't have the money to keep the doors open. And so perhaps had they found the right collaborators, they might have made it through. Time. How does time affect partnership building in the community? Well, I keep stressing this point. We keep stressing this point that it takes time to build good partnerships. And so sometimes in an effort to maybe be more efficient, we forget that we need to have regular meetings, regular investment of time into building the partnership and making sure we're both getting something out of it and that we're achieving the goals that we have for our community. So we cover a lot of ground. We want to make sure you also have some online resources available to you to follow up after this webinar. I'd like to hand it back to Lois to review some online resources available to you.
Great, thank you, Mike. The Foundation Center, as many of you may know it from other kinds of activities, fundraising, etc., has an amazing website that is really, really helpful, and I urge you all to explore it. This slide is the homepage of this section, which is called Nonprofit Collaboration Resources. We will be providing you links for all the resources that I'm going to be mentioning now, so you will be able to access these live and actually get onto them yourself. From this particular page, the image is an image which highlights a database, and then underneath the image there's a little database link. When you click on this database, a picture will emerge that shows you an image which is a small little map of the United States. From that page, you can either click on the map itself or a little link that says Go to Map Search. And when you click on this, a larger map of the United States will appear. There are little clickable circles around cities in states all across the United States. When you're actually on this site live, the little scroll bar to the left will help you move around the United States and go from a macro picture to a more detailed map in different sections of the United States. So you can really move around wherever you are in the United States. No, keep to the previous slide, please. When you pick any of those little circles, each circle will really represent a major city or an area around a city. When you click on one of those circles, a list of the collaborations in that area will pop up. Now this screen shows I had clicked on Dallas, Texas, and you can see on this screen there's a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 collaborations. This is also clickable, so you can go to any one of them. For instance, the first one says Thriving Minds, and when you click on that, you will come to an entire page of information on that particular collaboration. It will give you the list of the partners there, the type of collaboration, the scope, the focus area geographically, the year the collaboration was established, its goals, the circumstances promoting that collaboration, management structure, and much, much more. You get a wealth of information from this. And this is really a great tool for viewing what's going on in your local neighborhood. It gives you examples of partnerships that are thriving in your area, which can lead you to not only examples, but can lead to your own ideas. It can give you some contacts. It can provide inspiration. It gives you community background, really lets you know more about what's going on in your community. So I really, really urge you to play around with this and take a look.
Lois, this is
Yes.
Liz. We have a question that is applicable to this
Yes.
subject in the Q&A.
Yeah.
Alyssa asks, do you have to have a subscription to the Foundation Center to access the nonprofit collaboration site?
No. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things, a lot of the tools in the Foundation Center website do not require subscriptions. I mean, there are a few things that you need a subscription to do, but this is not one of them. And I just went in, I don't have a subscription. I just went into the site and I just clicked around and all of this information came up. So no, it's free. It's totally free. You just need access to a computer.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, next slide. In addition, the Vista campus has a number of resources very specifically related to partnerships. The first one listed here, Leveraging Partnerships for Community Impact, is a self-instructional tutorial, and it covers many of the points that we've covered in this webinar, but it also has some other useful information. It's self-paced. You just go through it at your own pace. Not very long, but quite comprehensive. And then there's another PDF, a sheet, Tools for True Collaboration and Partnership Success. And this is just a sheet of guidelines, reminders of things that you should do that will help you in developing your partnerships. Now I will turn this back over to Mike, who's going to ask you another question.
All right, thank you, Lois. I was just thinking as I looked at that website that we don't want to recreate the collaboration if it's already there. If there's something we can join, that I would encourage you to look at that website to see if there's some partnership or coalition you can join in and have some of your needs met without having to start from square one. So we do want to mobilize you to take action. I know some of you already are. So I would love to hear, quote unquote, I'd love to see from you in the chat box, what is one action you will take to build partnerships in your community? So write your answer in the chat box, and I like past chat box questions. I will read a few of them off before we move toward your formal question and answers. Oh, I'm seeing get approval from the CO, and I just scrolled past me. Attend the neighborhood associate meetings in the neighborhood where my organization is located. Great resource. Go to more community meetings. Yes. Invite for-profit organizations to help expand programs. Make yourself known in the community. Use those minute messages. Work on current partnerships. We have built a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. Need to more clearly define the relationship. Important. Talk to more youth to see what they want. See what they're, what they're wanting. Maybe unorthodox, but partnerships come from local university groups like their interest groups or even social groups like sororities. Oh, absolutely. Find out what organizations we currently have and strengthen those relationships that we currently have partnerships with, I assume. Yeah, do find that out. You don't want to strike out on a relationship and find it's already been established or you've already tried it and it didn't work. You want to know that history. Survey business owners about loan products they need. Sure, think about your needs and build a list of potential organizations you can partner with. Reach out to them one by one. There's a list maker. Reach out to universities. Become less shy. I think you can be shy and get out there. You can still have that quality. Introduce yourself to the community by going to different community events. Schedule appointment to meet with my local mayor. Excellent. Yes, go to your legislator. You never know. Maybe I'll read one or two more. Look into connecting with community college. Great resource, yes. Yeah, keep on typing. And at this time, though, okay, I'll read one more. Talk with local nonprofits and see what projects they're working on. See if my organization can help. Talk to my pastor about my organization leads. Great. Let's move to the to next steps, and then we're going to finish with some question and answer from you all. And hopefully, we can answer your specific questions. So next steps. One, review these responses that you're seeing now. It's scrolling. I'm loving seeing all these ideas. I also earlier saw a lot of interesting strands of conversation about partnering with churches and some of the successes and challenges. Note both as you think about moving forward with those type of partnerships. determine if your organization is ready to partner. Again, revisiting what I was saying about, and know what you're looking for in a partnership. It's very hard to partner if you don't know what it is you are looking to achieve with that. Refer to the community will just to think about a broad variety of sectors as potential collaborators. Is there some sector didn't occur to you that might actually be a great way to further your goals? And then remember the 2 distinct phases in the process. Finding the partner and building the relationships. Might seem obvious, but again, it's about investing in that relationship once it's been formed. So you're not forgetting that part, that you're continuing to be clear about your relationship. So here you're going to see instructions. I think this is where I hand it off to someone else to.
Exactly. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah,
Well,
thank
this
you.
is really exciting. You guys have done an amazing job sharing resources and ideas in the chat. So congratulations on that. We're going to move to the next phase of this webinar. So the formal presentation is concluded, but we will take the next 20 minutes to answer your questions. We have several already in the Q&A, but Rebecca, can you remind everybody how to call in using the phone?
Thank you. We'll begin the question and answer session on the phones. If you'd like to ask a question, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name clearly when prompted. I'll introduce you by name.
Great, thank you. So we'll go ahead and take a couple in the Q&A and let them pile up, hopefully, on the phone. So James has been waiting here in the Q&A. He wants to know, and Mike, perhaps you can answer this question, how do you address regional and cultural taboos that place certain community organizations at opposite ends of the spectrum at shared volunteered activities?
That's a great question.
That's a good one.
That's always an answer when you don't know what to say right away. It's a great question.
It is a good question.
So I think, one, it starts with being aware of what some of the regional cultural taboos are. It sounds like James is aware. We referred in the VISTA pre-service orientation, I think, albeit a little bit briefly, but I think it's always good to connect with those what we call cultural guides or coaches, people who have had more experience than I in the community. And even if I've lived there all my life, there probably is someone who's had more experience than me, and find out how they're navigating those taboos. And I think we need to be strategic in our partnerships, that sometimes we just aren't going to be able to partner because we are so vastly different in our values. Might not be that we're different in our values, but how we express our values. We often find we'll have common values, but the way we express them in the community is quite different. But again, I would really look into that mentor or coach in the community that has good reputation and a longer history with the community or communities that we want to partner with.
Super, thank you. Now we're going to move on to Tiffany. What do we do when we meet with a potential partner and they seem really into it and then they just seem to cut off communication?
Bug them.
Yeah,
I mean that in a positive way. Like, do circle back. I certainly have experienced this, especially in working with schools, actually. That I find, teachers, for example, are so busy, and and sometimes they just won't call me back, and then I need to move on. But I find calling, emailing, we keep in our database, in the last program I ran, it's a youth philanthropy program, we actually keep the preferred method of communication in our database, and we ask that when we start partnering with a school because we know how busy they are. So sometimes just knowing the right method of communication. If there's any way to find someone else in that organization to find out what, nicely ask why was communication cut off, and play detective a bit. And always being grateful for the time that people have given us, that we don't want to burn any bridges along the way, and it might just not work right now, but maybe later. But I always like to keep coming back to folks, even if they haven't been great about staying in communication with me. But I probably do have to be efficient with my time and move on if they're just not getting back to me.
Great. So yes, communicate with people and how they want to be communicated with. That's great. One more question in the Q&A. Catherine asks, I work at a community engagement center at a local university. Any ideas on how to be a facilitator for nonprofits to build relationships?
Yeah. Well, get out there yourself. like go, I see in the chat thread, we're just talking about go attend community events, and not just attend, but let people know who you are. Those people you seem like have goals in the community, to introduce yourself. Make sure you do have a business card just so they have that contact info. I mean, these days we can just have people plug in our phone numbers on smartphones often. I'm one of the rare folks who's still on the flip phone. I still am now.
Oh,
but,
wow, Mike.
but I can even plug in a number in my flip phone. So get out there. Local Seattle University here has a similar center, and one of the greatest things they did is they hosted a luncheon where they fed us really good food, and they invited in community-based nonprofits in the neighboring in the local neighborhood, and I happen to be one of those in one of those nonprofits, and they hosted us for lunch, and they talked about what works for their university professors in terms of partnering, and that's one of the most helpful things that I found. So if you can host something similar and have something to invite them to when you're out at other community meetings, that can be a great way to facilitate that partnership building.
Super. We're going to take a few more in the Q&A because there's several, and then find out if there's any on the phone. This is from Kristen. How do you sustain partnerships if you are the third/final Vista at your site?
Yeah, I would want to be thinking about, everybody will say, have a sustainability binder, and I'll say that is helpful to staff that are going to be on that in the future. But I think what's more helpful is thinking about, well, how do you transfer the relationships? How do you, if you are the one with a really strong relationship, what can you do to make sure that relationship goes on past you? So whether that's coffee, lunch, whether that's inviting out a staff person who's going to take over what you're doing to community events where that partner is present. I think any way we can facilitate ongoing contact with that program, as well as keeping good records. I'm a fan of that, but I think in the end what's going to keep it going is feeling a sense of connection to each other, and the mission and vision of the two organizations or institutions. So introductions. I just left a position I'd been in a long time, and one of the things we did a lot of is I just had coffee meetings with several key people and said, I want you to meet Leah, was the staff person who was going to be doing some fundraising for my program I just left. I had about 10 of those meetings, and then we also made clear, okay, what's our commitment moving forward?
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So Rebecca, do we have any calls that have come in through the phone line?
I'm showing no questions.
Okay, we do have one that's come in by VoIP. So what is the question that we have from Krista?
So it looks like, Krista, I'm going to open up Enable Your Microphone so that you can ask it. If you have a microphone, just make sure to click on the phone button to enable your mic to ask your question. Your line should be open.
Krista, are you there?
Okay, just in case Krista's having trouble, I do have in the chat her question. So Krista Beth says, some people are more introverted and have a difficult time getting out there and networking in the community. What is some advice to help them be more confident and comfortable in initiating partnerships?
Super. And Catherine and Rachel, our Vistas on the phone, please feel free to answer any of these questions as well if you have tips for folks, including Krista. So whomever wants to take that one.
In fact, since I've been talking a lot, Catherine or Rachel, do one of you want to?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can take this.
Yeah.
Or Rachel, do you want it?
Go ahead, Catherine.
Okay. So I would say either if you have another Vista on your site, going out together, having that person there always can help. Also, maybe finding a person at your program or at your site, not a Vista, so maybe an employee, or in my case, a school teacher, or another faculty or staff, be your confidant and go out with you as well, or help you craft emails, or even maybe help you listen to your conversation on the phone, and so you can improve time by time. Because I know when I first went out and started to recruit, I was shaky and nervous, and then more and more you do it, the better you get at it. So that's my
Mhm.
advice. Rachel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, that's a great point, Catherine. And I definitely consider myself an introverted person for sure. It's just about developing the confidence, maybe practicing your pitch on some staff members or partners or, family, whatever. And so that when you actually do go out and talk to this potential partner, you know exactly what you're going to say and just go from there. But yeah, I think it definitely is hard when you're introverted, but that shouldn't stop you from creating partnerships.
That's great. Thank you both. Just as a reminder, if you do want to submit a question via the VoIP, there is a little person holding up their hand above the PowerPoint, and you just pull down that screen and click raise hand, and hopefully the sound will work if you do decide to ask a question that way. But let's return to the Q&A because we have more questions there.
I do have a quick comment.
Oh, sure. Go
Just
ahead,
that
Mike.
a little, I find there's a shy side of me. Some might, and that's surprising, especially those who are in PSO with me. But I do have a shy side, and I found just asking other people good questions. Because here's the trick: they talk more than me then. But then as they're talking about what they're doing, then I am noting what do we have in common and what we don't, frankly, and sort of thinking out what the partnership idea is. It also makes it a little easier because then I don't have to do this like my minute message that I keep saying is important to have. But I think it's also about being in conversation and listening to others as well, so that have your message ready, but also be in conversation with people, which I find a little easier than presenting and hoping they like what I have to say.
That's great. Amber in the chat says, definitely an introvert, but have met more people in the last few months of being a Vista than I've met in the last few years. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a good question from Rihanna. How do you determine if the partnership/collaboration should have a written agreement? Are there different levels of written agreements?
Well, to this last question, yes, there are all kinds of different levels. I would say, I have templates handy that I can make available. But, and how do you determine? I think it really depends on the situation. And, so I would be thinking about, well, how involved is our partnership? Often this determination is made once there's some problems that come up, and so you're like, oh, we need to have this in writing. But I think there are a few things I would be thinking about. If there's a lot of time and money involved, probably there should be at least a simple written, often we'll talk about using a memorandum of understanding that basically just says, to give you an idea of how these are structured, says, this is what X organization agrees to provide. This is what X business agrees to provide. This is how we're going to communicate with each other. Basically going back to those success factors and laying out, you could even use that as a template and lay out, where are we, how are we aligned, why are we partnering, and then, how are we going to do it, how often are we going to communicate. And if both parties are open to it. I have had a number of partnerships go completely on verbal agreement, and it's worked just fine. I think it had a lot to do with just being so well aligned, both culturally as well as in what we want to achieve in the community, that we didn't need it as much. But I think if there's a significant amount of money and time involved, write something up.
Right. You can always clarify things through emails. You can use those as agreements as well, informal agreements.
Right.
Maybe one of our Vistas might want to take this next question from Emily. I work within a service learning office. Therefore, I act more as a middleman between the students and community partners. So what would strengthening a partnership look like when you're not the one having direct interaction with them or not always utilizing their resources depending on the course? So I don't know if anybody has an initial thought on that. If you're more of a middle person and you're trying to strengthen a partnership when you're not always having direct contact with the community partners. Or Mike, if you have a thought on that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think one of the ways that I can be coaching the person that does have direct contact, I am probably also thinking maybe there is a role for me to have direct contact. I imagine this is about a situation where it's about a time efficiency issue. And so the immediate thing that comes to mind is just making sure adequate support in terms of tracking that relationship too is another role I can play as third party, and having good tracking it so the person that are in direct contact are clear what the relationship's been. In our school database for the program Penny Harvest that I used to run, a youth philanthropy program, we would keep just short comments about what our relationship with the school was through the course of the school year, so that when new staff come on, as they did this year, they can look to that database and see, okay, we've had a strong relationship with them, we've had a rocky relationship, this is who we talk to in the school. So this way I can wrap my head around the question and apply my own situation. But any other comments? Catherine or Rachel?
I have one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say just simply asking and talking more about what other programs you have going on. So for my situation, we recruit mentors and tutors, but we started a community garden. And just by talking about that with Seminole State and the mentors and tutors and also my partner there, you found that people were interested in it, and then they were asking, well, how can we donate? So it grew from just a mentor-tutor relationship to now they're donating. So just talking and simply asking what else they have to offer.
That's great. Thank you. All right, we're going to keep going because we've got still more questions in the Q&A. This one's from Kara. Specifically, how do you address forming partnerships when there is no formal or any to speak of budget for the program in which you are trying to form partnerships?
Rachel or Catherine?
Or was that Lois?
Lois? Or maybe Lois?
Anyone want to take that one?
I'll go ahead if others don't.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Okay. Well, I think I'm thinking about who do I partner with that does have some money to bring to the table is one thing I'm thinking that, yeah, that's my immediate thought. Like, are there businesses in the community that would see it of benefit to them to get on board with this project? When we're in the Northwest here, we're always like, how can we connect with Starbucks or Microsoft? But there's also a lot of smaller businesses that might really care about the issue I'm working on. So I'm thinking money, and I also don't want to make assumptions about who has resources and who doesn't if we've got a really good alignment, because they might have connections to someone who could bring in the resources. So I think I'm thinking, if I don't have a budget, I'm thinking small first, but I am thinking about the fundraising piece is going to be fairly critical, as we all need a little bit to get going.
And as Janelle points out in the chat, partnerships do not need to be solely monetary exchanges. Many times contacts are more valuable than one-time gift. Tapping into people's inner networks goes a long way. So yes, Janelle, thank you for that. Okay. Moving along, Shamir has a question. I'm serving in New York City at a charter school that has grown tremendously over the last few years, which of course means an abundance of organizations, and it is a little overwhelming at times. How do you begin to narrow the list down to reach organizations that you can make lasting relationships with that will affect the population you want to target?
An abundance issue.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, great problem. Rachel, or I'm also going to just quickly, Rachel or Catherine, do you want to comment? I think to comment on that, I would probably go back to some of the success factors we talked about and almost create a, sort of a rubric for myself about, I am thinking about who do we have the strongest connection to when I think about relationship building, but strongest alignment, that brings enough resources to the table, whether that be time or money or both, to make the relationship successful. Sort of go down that checklist. And if I've got a check by every one, that's going to tell me, well, these are some priority partnerships to keep and maintain. I think that's one of the things we're seeing with some of these charter schools is that they are doing some pretty good partnering with the community, and so that's a great problem to have almost too many organizations to sift through. But I would, use some of these success factors or factors that make or break and use them as a checklist And the
Mhm.
ones that have the most checks as yeses by them or that there's strengths by them, that those are the ones I'm going to prioritize.
Great. I just want to ask Rebecca, do we have any calls coming in through the phone?
I'm still showing no questions. Again, just a reminder, it is *1.
Okay, thank you. And do we have any in the VoIP? We are finding out if we do. And we've got just a couple more in the Q&A, so we will keep, we've got a little more background that came in from Kara's question about forming partnerships when there is no formal budget. The host project that she's talking about is neighborhood revitalization with Habitat for Humanity. So there's no budget line for her service year. So she's looking to partner with other organizations to provide space, services, food items, etc., but do not have much to give back other than passion for serving the community and similar mission and goals. Okay, so it's your organization that doesn't have the budget. Got it. Do you have any advice for Kara given this nuance to her question?
Well, the in-kind donations that you reference are a great way to start. And I think sometimes, that can be enough, but we also, those businesses might, as they start to learn more about what you're doing and how you're offering such great service for the community, they might start to give money. But I think in-kind is a great way to start for small businesses. Any other comments, Catherine, Rachel?
You've also got a good, strong brand with Habitat for Humanity and with
Great
AmeriCorps.
brand.
So
Yeah.
hopefully getting, the name is, people know it, and hopefully they want to help, and you can go out there with that strong branding to your advantage.
Look into local housing developers, too. They often have some mandates as to what they're doing to provide affordable housing and get credit for doing that. And it offers a real financial advantage to them. So you might look to what your organization is already doing or not doing around connecting with housing developers.
That's great. We have a good question here from Corey. Due to past leadership and other issues, I have run into some problems creating partnerships. What are some tactful ways of repairing damaged partnerships and community relations? That's an interesting question. So what are some tactful ways of repairing damaged partnerships and community relations?
I'm having recently worked at an organization where we had some really difficult leadership and problematic leadership issues. I think honesty and transparency people really appreciate. They're, at least providing people with enough information that they kind of get what's happened, and that's going a long way towards building partnerships in the future. But also say what you learned from that, whatever fallout it was. People will appreciate hearing that and what you're committed to doing in the future. So the statement of where are we heading, and what, being able to passionately say why are you still doing the work with this organization? Right. What gets you passionate about what you're doing?
All right. Thank you, Mike. We are running out of time here, but we'd really appreciate your evaluation as we do these webinars and want to learn what worked well and what we need to improve. So if you, those of you still on the call, please go ahead and fill out that evaluation that you see in the left-hand corner of your screen. We'd really appreciate that. And you all have been very helpful. Thank you both to our Vistas, Catherine and Rachel. It was really a treat to have you all on the call today to learn about what you're up to, as well as to help chime in with some of these answers. Lois, thank you so much for your expertise. And Mike, thank you so much for all of your sharing and great ideas and contributions here in the presentation and in the Q&A. So I just want to remind folks we have another great webinar coming up tomorrow, planning your post-VISTA career. So no matter where you are in your service right now, whether you've just started or whether you're towards the end, it's never too soon to start thinking about what's next. So we're going to give you some real concrete ideas about how to go about planning your career after VISTA. That's tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So thanks to everybody for taking time out for your professional development. We really appreciate it, and we hope it's worthwhile to you. And I think that is